Hello, everybody. What is going on? I am in such a bubbly mood right now, and I am about to read you a classic, a legendary book, The Christian Significance. Oh my god, focus. Okay, I'm redoing the intro. Fuck! Life's short, smoke on board. God, my setup is so bummy. Oh, okay. Editing. The Christian Significance of Karl Marx by Alexander Miller. Whoa. Whoa. Alright, let's jump right into it. Used very good condition. Really? Really? Okay. Christian Significance of Karl Marx by Alexander Miller. Introduction. The tremendous impact of communism on the life of the world is one of the clearly... I need to set up the camera, and I was thinking about that. That's why I messed up that sentence. Alright, where should I put this bad boy? Damn, this bitch loose. Dude, I need front lighting. There's so many freaking trials and tribulations! Should I just post this entire gosh darn thing? You know I should. Take my Crocs off. Oh, please don't be dead. It's gonna be dead. It's not dead. Now, how am I gonna put this? Okay. Oh. Bottom shelf that. Just so in case. Like, there's just a whole void, like right here. Damn shame. I could just record outside. Oh wait, it's not a nice day. It's raining. And it has been for like days. And I don't even live in Washington. Alright. Much better. Looks like I'm around the campfire right now. Okay. Just clip this like right friggin' here. No, I can't. Ah, that's a screen. Okay. I'm gonna have to roundabout this. Right under the camera. Whoa. What is this? An ASMR video? I should zoom in a bit, shouldn't I? Look at those lanky ass arms. You like that, don't you? Alright. Let's get into it. Let's tear this puppy apart. I need a drink. Stay hydrated. The tremendous impact of communism on the life of the world is one of the clearest demonstrations of the far-reaching practical effects of which may follow from apparently highly theoretical sources. Nobody watching Karl Marx at work in the British Museum towards the middle of last century would have imagined that what was going on in his mind would one day have a drastic influence on the lives of millions of men and women all over the world. Yet, since Lenin and his associates set out to base the whole life of Russia on the principles first elaborated by Marx, there can be no doubt about it. The work of Marx was influential enough in the socialist parties of Europe before World War I. The history of Soviet Russia since 1917 has focused on the attention of the world upon it in quite a new way. It simply cannot be ignored. There is some ground to be cleared before we get to work on the main thesis of this book. The book itself is written primarily for Christians who are prepared to do some work on Marxism because they are not convinced, whether they accept the Marxist analysis or not, that communism is a momentous fact of which Christians are bound to take account. Today, there is a tendency to suggest that communism is washed up as a philosophy and discredited as a political technique. To write a book on communism, so some would say, is to flog a dead horse. Even Russia has discarded the pure form of it. And we are beginning to realize that the Marxist analysis does not explain contemporary change. We have been misled by an overemphasis on the economic, and we can see from the virality of nationalism and the varieties of modern fanaticism that the spiritual forces are more potent than we had been taught by Marxism to believe. Frick. Is somebody home? It is worth setting down the general line of this argument and to take the opportunity of insisting for those who are... Yeah, someone is home. It's my stepmom. Inclined to be influenced by it, that especially for students and young people, I wish people were that happy to see me. In industry, it simply does not correspond with their situation. To them, communism presents itself as the most coherent philosophy and the greatest single emotional drive that this generation has to deal with. If this fact did not create an audience ready to hand, I should be inclined to write a book in the form of a warning against accepting the conclusion that communism, with its alleged overemphasis on the economic, is dated and discredited. The chronic temptation to bypass economic demands in the name of spiritual is too easily exploited by the forces of reaction and counter-revolution, and it is pretty clear that the total effect of the line of argument I have outlined is to provide an excuse to do so. So much is probably worth saying to check those who might lay the book down, assuming that it was written by someone who hadn't read his Drucker and his Mannheim, and who was living still in a romantic world of the 19th century revolution, the world of class war and proletariat struggle. Christians who are at the grip with contemporary realities know that communism is a very live option for their contemporaries. It has strength and coherence enough to win some of the best of our people, and those who reject it for the other options, usually no more admirable or significant for doing so. There is a second line of argument which operates to divert Christian attention from the plain issues with communism, or which communism puts up. The burden of this is that it is absolute fashion Christianity and communism are in opposition, and that this fundamental antagonism makes discussion worthless. Communism is materialistic and Christianity is a spiritual religion, or communism does away with private property while classic Christian doctrine holds it necessary to man's true good, or communism attacks the sanctity of family life, which Christianity cherishes as an ordinance of God. But it won't do to foreclose discussion on grounds like these, for whatever our conclusions before this book is through, we shall certainly discover in the course of it that these distinctions are oversimplifications, that communism is not materialistic in the ordinary sense, nor is Christianity a spiritual religion. That Engels rightly and wrongly claimed that communists were the true defenders of private property, and that one of the grounds for this initial communist assault on capitalism was that it made the reality of family life impossible. All this is too epigrammatic to be enlightening, but again, it is probably worth setting down to make it clear that the issues may be quite other than they are often supposed to be, and that Christian integrity requires that they be fairly and honestly dealt with. What then is our business with communism? What is the approach to it with Christian integrity requires? In the first place, Christian integrity exacts a strict regard for facts. The Christian knows that all truth is to be honored because all truth belongs to Christ, even when it does not acknowledge him. The man who is afraid of facts does not believe in God, and is elementary Christian obligation to submit the discipline of rigorous scientific study. Our business, therefore, is certainly not to put up a communist straw man so that with hallelujahs and Christian huzzahs we can knock him down again. It is not even in the first place to find a Christian answer to communism. Rather, it is to expose ourselves to the full impact of Marxism, so that it may have its full chance to convince us. The only adequate way to do this is to read the Marxist stuff, but some will want convincing that will work, or but some will first want convincing that that work is worth doing, and others may feel that they have not the same. Jesus Christ. So the first 3 chapters of this book are simply the straight exposition of Marxist doctrine, an attempt to help Christians find their way about in this field of study. There is no Christianity in them at all, except the Christian responsibilities of the author to do the job fairly. The 4th chapter is a study of the kind of criticism that communism has had to meet, apart from any specific criticism that Christianity has to make. It is an attempt to discover how far historical change and later criticism has affected Marxist or orthodoxy. Marxist orthodoxy. But by the end of chapter 4, then communism has had its chance to convince us, if I have done my work fairly, so that, this is a whole bunch of personal stuff. We're skipping the introduction, or what I didn't read. Okay, what communism is. Chapter 1, the period of the manifesto. There's 2 quotes to start this off. Karl Marx Made a Man of Me, by G. Bernard Shaw, and Read Marx and Inwardly Digest, by D.D. Carmichael. Karl Heinrich Marx was born in Prussia in 1818, the son of a Jewish lawyer. His mother was a Dutch woman, and the financial difficulties in which the family lived are reflected in her saying that if Karl made a lot of capital instead of writing a lot about capital, it would have been much better. Damn, his mom said that. Karl Marx himself was sent to study law at Bonn, but removed after a year to study at the University of Berlin. because his interests were widening and his thirst for intellectual enlightenment were such that he felt it could be only satisfied in what was then the center of philosophic culture. He worked like a galley slave, whoa, taking the whole of knowledge for his province and finding the way from abstract idealism to the Hegelian dialect, which seemed to him to offer a living interpretation of reality and relief from the barrenness of the Kantian abstractions. By the time he moved to Paris, he had developed his criticisms of Hegel in the direction of a new formulation, and when he met Friedrich Engels in Paris in 1844, they found that they were blood brothers in a new understanding of philosophy and of social change. Engels was 2 years younger than Marx, the son of a prosperous manufacturer and himself engaged in commerce. From 1844 till the death of Marx in 1883, they worked with complete understanding to provide the revolutionary movement with a working theory and fighting strategy, and after Marx's death, Engels labored through a recurrent illness to complete Das Kapital from Marx's notes, to initiate this and supervise the works of transition into English and other languages, and to carry out on not only revolutionary polemic, but a prolonged defense of Marx's integrity as a scholar in the face of the assaults which developed against the alarming new theories and their first exponents. Engels died in 1895. The Communist Manifesto, the joint work in which Marx and Engels set out their new general view of history and the social change, was published in 1848. It ended not with a theoretical conclusion, but with a revolutionary slogan. This is like McDonald's. Let the ruling class tremble at the communist revolution. The proletariat have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Working men of all countries unite. Of the manifesto, Engels was able to write in 1888 that it had become undoubtedly the most widespread, the most international production of socialist literature, the common platform acknowledged by millions of working men from Siberia to California. Thrasher, dude. From 1850, Marx lived in England. Engels, after a period in Manchester, worked on, for the most part, from Paris. Their collaboration was one of the most single-minded and influential in history, whatever we may think of its results. In the statement of which we owe to Marx and Engels, communism is two things: a way of looking at the world and a method of changing it. On the communist views, these two are one, for to understand the world is to be able to change it, and conversely, those who are able to change the world have the only kind of understanding of it that is of interest. If, in its first aspect, then, we call Marxism a philosophy, let it be on the understanding that it is a philosophy which is the end of philosophy. For it expressly sets itself to make war against every kind of philosophizing, which deals in pure speculation or bare theory. It will have no theory or metaphysic which is not intimately related to activity. Theory and practice belong together, and neither can have validity without each other. How, then, did Marxism arrive at this point? The Renaissance initiated a process of philosophical debate which Hegel brought to a climax. Renaissance thought set over against Platonism, and idealism, an emphasis on naturalism and realism, a this-worldly viewpoint which was reflected not only in philosophy in the beginnings of the scientific outlook, but in the abandonment of medieval and symbolic art for the realism of the Dutch interior and the concentration of the immediate impact of experience without asking questions about ultimates. Walter Pater summed it up once for all at the end of the Renaissance. Every moment some form grows perfect in hand or face. Some tone on the hills or the sea is choicer than the rest. Some mood of passion or insight or intellectual excitement is irresistibly real and attractive for us, and for the moment only. Not the fruit of experience, but experience itself is the end. To burn away with this hard gem-like flame, to maintain this ecstasy in success in life, while all melts under feet, we may well catch at an exquisite passion or any contribution to knowledge that seems to be lifted horizon, to set the spirit free for a moment, or any stirring of the senses, strange dyes, strange colors, and curious odors, or works of the artist's hand, or the face of one's friend. With this sense of the splendor of our experience and its awful brevity, gathering all we are into one desperate effort to see or touch, we shall hardly have the time to make theories about the things we see or touch. Of this wisdom, the poetic passion, the desire for beauty, the love of art for art's sake, has most, for art comes to you professing frankly to give nothing but the highest quality to your moments as they pass, and simply for that moment's sake. Thank you, Walter Pater. This was all very well as a practical conclusion when men had abandoned dualism and other worldliness, and the Church's testimony to this supernatural, but it was impossible for serious speculation to beg the question which classical philosophy had posed about the relation of idea and thing, form and substance, and of the ultimate ground of existence, whether an eternal flux or unmoved mover. Hegel's unique contribution was to bring classic idealism and Renaissance naturalism into philosophic relation. This he achieved by introducing the concept of dialectic and interpreting the nature of reality as a continuing debate in which progress comes about, as in any discussion by the opposition and conflict of ideas or propositions. Reality is not static, nor is it a smooth progression. Without conflict, it moves as a debate moves. Yes, no, nevertheless. It was a Socratic method of getting at truth. It must be transferred from the sphere of logical inquiry and used as the key to the interpretation of reality. This is the Hegelian dialectic thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, and it is the philosophic method which enabled him to make a creative contribution to the endless discussion between idealism and materialism, between classic philosophy and Renaissance naturalism. For in his conception, the ultimate idea is in the dialectic relation to the world of nature, and history is the story of the dynamic struggle. The absolute concept does not only exist where unknown from eternity, it is also the actual living soul of the whole existing world. Then it alienates itself by changing into nature, where, without consciousness of itself, disguised as the necessity of nature, it goes through a new development and finally comes again to self-consciousness in a man, completely in the Hegelian philosophy. In this doctrine of the impregnation of nature with spirit or with the absolute concept, Hegel thought that he had not only provided the final philosophic synthesis and ended the arid controversy between idealism and materialism, but that he had done so in a form of new apologia for Christian orthodoxy. In fact, a restatement of it, the theological objection to it, of course, is that it must give man a status and right in himself as the expression of the divine apart from redemption, which is no responsible Christian thinking would concede to him. The distortion of Christian doctrine which Helgianism involves is seen as a sharper focus in Hegel's doctrine of the state, which he sees as the fullest historical expression of the immanent activity of the divine spirit. His worldview gives a validity, if not divinity, to human life as such supremely to its expression in the state. It provides no standing ground from which man can be called into question, or the state can be judged. It is one more unsuccessful attempt to use philosophy to strengthen the Christian case. But our concern with Helgianism is not in the details of it relating to Christianity, or in the details of its developed doctrine, but simply in its relation to Marxism. For in Marxism, the dialectic of Hegel was placed upon its head, or rather turned off its head, on which it had been standing there before, and placed upon its feet again. The relation of Marx to Hegel needs to be stated more precisely, and at some length. Both Marx and Engels in their 20s were ardent, young Hegelians. They were captivated by the possibility which Hegel offered of escape from the barren antagonisms of philosophical debate. Not only did Hegel offer intellectual satisfaction, but the dynamic concept of the idea in dialectic relation to the nature and history promised a basic for action, for intelligent participation in the work of the world and the affairs of nations. At the age of 23, Marx dedicated a doctor's thesis to his future father-in-law with the words, "Would that all who doubt the idea might be as fortunate as I, to admire an ever-young old man who greets each advance of time with an enthusiasm and poise of the truth, and with that conviction deep, sun-clear idealism which alone knows the right word to call up the spirits of the world, who never recoil before the shadows of reactionary specters, before the oft-clouded skies of time, but with godlike energy and manly sure glance pierces, always through all metamorphoses, to the Empyrean which burns in the heart of the world. You, my fatherly friend, have always been to me a living argumentum ad oculus. The idealism is not a fancy, but a truth." Whoa. Boy.